Former USC head coach Steve Sarkisian is suing the school for wrongful termination. Now, the suit claims the school sacked him instead of allowing him to seek treatment for a drinking problem. And that's illegal because he wasn't permitted to deal with his, quote, disability.
This was the moment USC's head football coach Steve Sarkisian's struggles with alcohol became public.
Get ready to fight on, baby. Let's go!
The coach to multiple Heisman Trophy winners, fired 2 months after this video surfaced. Now the former coach is firing back, filing an at least $12.6 million wrongful termination lawsuit against the university, saying he suffered from alcoholism, calling it a disability, but claiming USC kicked him to the curb when he sought treatment. Sarkisian was terminated for allegedly drinking on the job. His assistant coaches alleging he was under the influence during this September game, and some saying he appeared intoxicated at an October team practice. Initially placed on indefinite leave in October, Sarkisian fired less than 24 hours later without pay. Sarkisian denies he was ever drunk at work, including that booster event where he says he consumed 2 beers along with prescription medication for anxiety beforehand.
Yeah, we're trying to see the size of the beers that if it was 2. But okay, first off, alcoholism, first of all, is there a distinction between drinking too much repeatedly on the job and having a diagnosed addiction to alcohol?
You're better off if you're an alcoholic than having a couple of beers. Isn't that ironic? You have more protection under the law.
But it's a defined
if you're a fully
disability.
adult alcoholic like him, a full-blown alcoholic, you're better off that way because then you're protected by the disability laws.
Okay.
So they have to make reasonable accommodations.
Now, I think I'm on safe ground that the vast majority of the public says, wait a minute. If I showed up banged up and I came to work half in the bag, my boss isn't just going to say, like, well, you know what, you got a disability, we'll take out. You're going to be lucky if you have a job the next day. He's also, Doug, in the presence of minors. You have 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that are on the football team. The event that we showed him where he was a mess at the stage, after that, the school put him in treatment to get help. He told them he not only understood the conditions of employment there, but that he was going to get his act together. He then reportedly showed up to another practice and another game under the influence. Apparently, he had the same problem at a prior job that he didn't disclose in the application process as well. At what point does this become self-responsibility instead of the university, having to say what is a personal choice that he chose to do, that becomes something that they have to absorb?
Well, what Mark just said is probably what they're going to say. He's a guy that came to the job. He was a guy who's good at his job. He got this job, pays a lot of money, and he made a lot of poor decisions.
He wasn't fit to do the job, and any accommodations that we would have to make would not be reasonable. They would undermine the performance of a head coach. He can't do the job of a head coach. But the problem is, for both sides, these are all fact questions. As this complaint is pleaded, it's going to survive a dismissal motion. There's little question about that. They're going to get into discovery, a pre-litigation posture, and the case is going to be settled because probably a lot of dirt is going to come out about both sides. Probably USC knew a lot of what he was doing and turned a blind eye to it and covered it up. And probably he has a lot of skeletons in the closet that he doesn't want to come out because it'll affect his employment prospects going forward. So it'll probably be settled.
But it's not a disability because somebody just decided to make it one because they had nothing to do. Alcoholism is a disease.
I appreciate that.
And it does qualify, and it does and should qualify as a disability.
And we should treat it and get people help. But my point is, should the job be preserved for someone?
Not necessarily.
Well,
no.
Not necessarily, but as Mark said, it's a question of fact. But because it's a disability, reasonable accommodations need to be made. And in this case, if reasonable accommodations were made and they were found not to be adequate and they're found not to possibly be able to ameliorate the problem, then they're going to get past the problem.
But where does the burden go to, which for me is, obviously he had an incident that everybody agreed was egregious, okay? He then went to go get help. Now, I don't think anyone thinks 2 weeks is going to be a sufficient thing, but that's what they did. But is that incumbent on the person who's getting the treatment to in effect, not cure oneself? You don't cure yourself of it, but to treat it? Or is that the job of the employer to say that it's up to them to figure out that you're finally in a good enough state of mind? Who bears the responsibility after diagnosis, or at least after acknowledgement, that you're now suitable to get back into the workplace. How is any employer supposed to figure out how to continue to provide their product, whatever it may be, if they can't rely on the person to be there?
Well, the coach has that burden. And I would want to go back and find out, what documents were signed when he first started his employment there. Did he make any misrepresentations? And really, I'm looking at it as a contract.
Well, let's assume there's a moral
there's
conduct
that
clause,
part
which
too.
you can't be under the influence of anything in front of the kids.
Absolutely, and I think that, again, that's your contractual issue. And if you look at the kids, when the kids that are playing football have these incidents, they
Yeah,
lose their
they're
scholarship.
reprimanded, lose their
And their
scholarship.
scholarship is a contract. Sometimes the kids actually lose their scholarship because they got hurt on the field. They're not drinking or doing anything else, and you lose
Don't
your
open up that
contractual
can of
scholarship.
worms. We'll get into the concussion movie later on here. All right. I want to thank all the guys at the table here and want to get you involved at home in our conversation as well. Head over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on today's question. Is alcoholism a disability for which one should not be terminated? A broad question, albeit, but one I'd love to get your opinion on since it's touched so many families, obviously, across this country. All right, coming up next, updates on some of the biggest legal stories of the day, including why the former police chief in Suffolk County is now in FBI custody.